Hello. This is going to be brief. I'm only going to talk about hemoglobin. Blood in general is relatively easy to study just from the textbook and my study guide. Uh, Unfortunately, there's some stuff to memorize, uh, but hemoglobin is interesting. Hemoglobin is a molecule that's found inside of red blood cells. Lots and lots of molecules of hemoglobin in each red blood cell. Red blood cell is essentially just a packaging for hemoglobin. And it transports hemoglobin around the body because hemoglobin is really, really good at binding oxygen and binding carbon dioxide, depending on the environment it finds itself in. Hemoglobin is a complex protein. Our genome has two genes for hemoglobin, alpha and beta. And those two genes are both transcribed and translated. And once they're translated, you're going to have a polypeptide. You're going to have a string of amino acids. And that string of amino acids, the order of amino acids, is the primary structure of that protein. As various forces, chemical and physical, act on that protein, it starts folding and bending. So you get a secondary structure. Then chaperonins, molecules that themselves are proteins, are going to come in and shape the new proteins into the shapes they need to be in. And then hemoglobin also gets the quaternary structure, and that is a fusion of two alpha and two beta hemoglobins, uh, attachment to each one of those four, a molecule of heme, and each molecule of heme gets an iron ion. Iron ion is what is going to bind the oxygen. The oxygen is going to be found where mostly in the lungs. Uh, Hemoglobin has an interesting property, really, really good property, that in places where it's colder, like in the lungs, it has a greater affinity for oxygen and lesser affinity for carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide, when it's bound, is bound somewhere else. Most of carbon dioxide is not uh, transported by red blood cells or by hemoglobin, but in the blood, in the plasma, in various forms. But some of it is. So when it gets to the lungs, where it's cooler, and also where it's less acidic, uh, both of those uh, types of environment, cooler versus warmer and less versus more acidic, allow hemoglobin molecule to bind oxygen and to release carbon dioxide. That's exactly where you want it, right? That's where blood goes to pick up oxygen. Then it goes into the body, goes to various organs. Those organs are working hard, so they're especially muscles, for instance, or heart. Because they're working hard, they are generating temperature. I remember how that goes. So, um, where it's higher temperature and there's a lot of work, especially in places like muscles or heart, there is also going to be a production of some acids like lactic acid. There's going to be more hydrogen ions around. So, in those places in the body, the temperature is going to be higher and the acidity is going to be greater. Those are two conditions in which hemoglobin is more likely to let go of the oxygen and to bind carbon dioxide instead, which is exactly where you want that to happen, right? You want those working muscles to get oxygen and to release the carbon dioxide into the bloodstream to go to the lungs. So Hemoglobin has those wonderful properties. We are going to revisit those properties when we do the respiratory system. But for now, this is what you need to know. There are sometimes mutations in the gene, one of the two genes, alpha or beta, in of the hemoglobin genes, which result in the inability of these chaperonin molecules to fold the hemoglobin in the correct shape. It's a small mutation, it's a point mutation, just like one nucleotide is changed. But as a result of that, it changes electrical polarity in that part of the molecule and it cannot be folded correctly. So, when the quaternary structure is achieved, so you have four uh, subunits bound together, all those schemes on and stuff like that, it's a misshapen molecule. So those misshapen molecules cannot be neatly stacked inside of the red blood cells. So there's much fewer of them in each red blood cell. Red blood cell itself then loses its shape. It cannot be a nice little round disc. Instead, it becomes big and kind of uh, longer, kind of elongated. This is what is called the sickle cell anemia. Because there's fewer uh, hemoglobin molecules in the cell, those red blood cells are not really good at carrying a lot of oxygen where it's needed. Because of their shape, they're also kind of slow and sluggish and tend to get stuck in capillaries, tend to get stuck in places where there might be some atherosclerosis already going on. They'll glue themselves to each other and obstruct capillaries. So it's not a really good condition to have. Now, you may have probably heard in some other biology classes that the mutation persists in the population because when it's heterozygous, when you have mutation only on only one of the chromosomes and not on both, then hemoglobin packs nicely and it looks nicely and it does its whole functioning perfectly. But this mutation confers immunity to malaria. So, in places where malaria is rampant, like Mediterranean, Northern Africa, those kinds of places, this mutation persists. And this is what's called balancing selection or something like that. If there's more and more mutants, there's more likely that the offspring of a pairing is going to be homozygous and thus have sickle cell anemia, which, if not treated, and for the most of history there was no treatment, those kids would die. And so that will lower the percentage of the mutation in the population. And so when it gets too low, more people are not immune to malaria. More people get the malaria, more people die of malaria. So the proportion of the mutation in the population now proportionally rises, right? Like the percentage of people who have it is now going to be greater because people who are homozygous for not having the mutation have been killed by malaria. So the mutation is constantly balancing, just going a little up and down, a little up and down over the thousands and thousands of years. That is called balancing selection. Okay, uh, so that's pretty much what you need to know about hemoglobin, the kind of a key and most interesting and important molecule carried around by the blood, and the whole purpose of having red blood cells. And we are going to revisit it when we get down to respiratory system. Thank you.